Welcome and thank you to everyone that's here to our third Desi Poetry reading. This one is on uncertainty and change. I am Srishti Prabha, the assistant editor at India Currents, and I am so delighted to bring you 6 accomplished poets talking about uncertainty, change, and a year of inconsistency, which I'm sure we all feel. So just a little bit about India Currents before we start, in case you're new to India Currents or haven't been following us. We've been around for 33 years. We cover every sort of topic, and this is the first year I think we've really delved into doing poetry readings. So this is a new space for us. We're very excited. We've never done Zoom live readings, so I hope they've been going well. We've been seeing people attend them, so that's very exciting for us. The other thing I want to mention is that we are currently running a donation campaign to support community journalism, because as you know, community journalism isn't funded very well. So every dollar that you donate to India Currents right now and until December 31st will be matched. So if you possibly have even $5 to $10 to give and continue having poetry readings like this, please donate. I will drop that link in the chat box in a second. And I will also drop the link to subscribe to our newsletter so you know when events like this are happening in the future. With that said, I want to introduce our collaborators, our Matwaala directors, Usha and Pramila. Usha, who unfortunately can't be with us right now, but Pramila will be here and she will introduce Matwaala for you all.
Hello, everyone. Good evening. It's a pleasure for me to introduce Matwaala. On behalf of Usha and Matwaala, I welcome all of you. My co-coordinator, Usha Akella, could not be here today. So this is the third in the series of Matwaala readings that we've had this year, hosted by India Currents. So thank you, Srishti and Kanchan, for hosting us. It is really lovely to see so many Matwaala poets being featured, throughout this year. Of course, we could not have any face-to-face readings, so the Zoom has been fabulous in really expanding our collective. So this year we had virtual readings at Stony Brook at the Bank Center, and of course the Matwaala readings by India Currents. So my hope is that you continue to write, publish, and share your poetry and expand the halls of Matwaala. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Pramila. It's been wonderful being able to collaborate with you all as well. So with no further ado, I want to introduce my co-moderator, Kanchan Naik, who is the youth editor at India Currents. She's a teen poet laureate herself. She's very young, but she's very accomplished. And so let me unmute her so she can do a little introduction for herself.
Thank you, Srishti, and thank you all for attending our next poetry reading of this year. Last time we had this wonderful opportunity to share our poetry and our conversations about everything ranging from the presidential elections to cultural appropriation. It was an incredibly insightful conversation. So today I'm very happy that we get to continue that dialogue with our new theme. So our first poet of the evening is Sara Garg, a sophomore in high school and a prolific poet who began her journey as a writer in the 4th grade. Her works have been read at the Matwaala South Asian Diaspora Poetry Festival and published in 2 of the Austin International Poetry Festival's anthologies. Along with winning the Youth Poet of the Year award at the Houston International Poetry Festival in 2017, Sara was also the only youth poet featured on a poetry wall at the Irving Museum in Dallas as a part of Smithsonian's Beyond Bollywood showcase. Thank you for joining us, Sara.
having me. So I'm just going to get right into it and start reading if everybody's ready. This first poem is a way for me to express the general sentiment behind most of the poems that I'm going to be reading today. It is a semi-acrostic that relies on phonetics to form its final message. In this poem, I try to demonstrate that feeling of waiting that so many people have right now. This poem is entitled 2020. When the world seems insane, it comes for you too. That realization, that moment you say, oh. When you search for something to look to and end up just waiting for the count to zero. My second poem is about a very common trail of, oh, okay. Let's try something.
Sarah, is your volume working? Sarah, can you say something so we can hear you? Okay.
Okay, can you guys hear me now? Okay, sorry about that. These headphones sometimes work and they sometimes don't. Okay, sorry about the delay. I'm gonna restart. So again, I'm Sara Garg and I'm a sophomore in high school. This first poem is a way for me to express the general sentiment behind most of the poems that I'm going to be reading today. It is a sorry about the echo. It is a semi-acrostic that relies on phonetics to form its final message. In this poem, I try to demonstrate the feeling of waiting that so many people have right now. This poem is entitled 2020. When the world seems insane, it comes for you too. That realization, that moment you say, oh. When you search for something to look to and end up just waiting for the count to zero. My next poem is about a very common trail of thought with the world today about the pandemic. This poem was adapted from my semi-acrostic Lights for the Fireflies that thanked healthcare workers for their work and addressed them as heroes. But this poem has a different tone. It questions what the pandemic means for healthcare workers and if the world will ever fully recover from the pandemic. The person being addressed in the poem is one of the fireflies mentioned. This poem is entitled Down a Darkened Path. It's a dark night, made of obsidian. Nothing can be seen in the darkness, except the glimmers of light. Those lights venture out where no paths are laid, going to someplace new. I see you there. Hi. Inside the dark, there are monsters who are screaming of their presence, but those lights ignore them and venture inside. Are you afraid? The roars shake through them. They tremble and fall. Most of them get up. Their eyes are blindfolded as they go into the dark. They only have each other for guidance. What makes you go there? They hope to bring the other lost to the light, and sometimes they succeed. Other times, the monsters do. You see lights winking out. They drift far apart, become prone to the dark. They know the risks, these tiny, bright lights, who go back into the black, time and time again. They shine like fires and battle like nights. But do you know if you can ever come out? Okay, my next poem stems from an idea behind the Black Lives Matter protests earlier this year. It is written from the point of view of blood as it falls from an unnamed Black boy's chest and reflects on the lack of intrinsic differences between races and the nature of racism. It also gives a voice to the terror and confusion of unexpected death. This poem is entitled Blood Questions. I am powerful, a shark at ease. What can stop me? I feel an explosion rock me. It snags me on a lead line. What's happening? My ocean is a boy. He should not be drying up this soon. I thought he had time. He gasps. I have worked hard. I have given him life. He groans. I have tried the best that I can. He screams. I have given him everything I am. Why him? Why me? Why so soon? He splits open. I can see the outside, a flash of blue, a brass badge. The blue thing shouts, my boy crumbles. Then the blue thing lifts up a black box, and I can see its arms. They are red too. And I can see something on its arms that is the same as me. Why is it safe? Why is it free? Why not me? My boy falls. His fingers reach out. He's going to save me, catch me, to put me back in my ocean. I'm afraid, but my ocean is close. I can make it, right? I reach out, so close. Do it a bit more. He grabs me. I slip through. I tumble. A fish, gasp, dying, out, groan of water. I am going, gone. I am falling. This next poem is a bit of an outlier from the rest, as instead of focusing about events from this year, it focuses on the stereotypes and problems with the idea of beauty in our society. This poem is entitled Glass Walls Inside Us. A thin globe grows in us, made of water that has a voice that breaks diamond. Look at me. We run like we are afraid of a shark that is watching us and will eat us unless we can pull ourselves tighter into turtle shells. Beautiful. We are statues, frozen to the water, only moving to pluck away parts of each other and try to fit them to ourselves. Look at you. We stand in our showers, turning up the water as if a foul dirt is still upon us. Ugly. We love the water. We hate what we see when we stare into its depths and wish to become phoenixes. You are not good enough. We shatter, we freeze, we melt, we burn, locked in the endless tunnel, not seeing where we are or where we can go, just waiting for something, waiting for someone to toss a pebble, to make a splash and make the glass shatter. So this final poem is a bit of a summary of the tension that has been so prevalent this year, especially with the start of the COVID-19 pandemic. It is a way for me to express what so many of us are feeling right now. Will things get better or worse? This poem is entitled Sunset, Sunrise. I can see the horizon. It is an ocean that goes beyond my eyes plane. It looks like an ink stain spreading out forever. Then the ink swirls, turns into words, stories of things to come and what has been done. The ink folds onto paper and I see a crown. Then it flips like a coin, and I see the other side, a broken throne. And I look again, and I don't see crowns or kings. I see people gather like droplets of a wave. I look and I see mountains of red crowns that bleed and try to take down the people trying to climb them. The horizon shifts, and it turns into an ocean, and the water glimmers with the tears of those who died, and roars with the shouts of those who cried. The ink keeps shifting, twisting, in and out and up and down and imploding and exploding, and I can't look. What does it matter? What do? I can't do anything. I look up. I can't fix this world, but maybe the sun can. The horizon is a forever, and the sun is the only thing that can stop it from expanding. Its fingers are reaching above the horizon's line. It's grasping at the world. The sun is almost here. I squint. I look again. The problem is, I can't tell. if it's a sunrise or a sunset. Thank you.
Thank you, Sarah. I loved your poems, and one thing that I noticed about a lot of your work is this kind of rhythm that you maintain in some of them, like the sequence that you have in your poem 2020. And I was wondering if there was actually any like significance behind that rhythm, or was that just something that you felt like came really naturally to you while you were writing the piece? Oh, I think she has to unmute.
Sorry, I accidentally muted myself. So I'm going to attribute all of that rhythm to Usha Kella. She's been my poetry teacher since the 4th grade. And we started off with a lot of rhyming poems, haikus. She made me learn how to use concrete language to describe the things around me. I believe the first poem she had me write was about a banana. Then she was like, okay, this isn't very good. You're going to try again. And by the end of the first year, I could write a decent poem about a banana. So, I mean, Usha Auntie has helped me mature as a poet in so many ways. So any rhyme or rhythm that I've created in those poems is because of the skills I've gained learning as her student.
That's amazing. Honestly, as someone who had the honor of meeting Usha at our last poetry reading, I can totally see kind of like some of the influence in your work. And I think I mean I loved hearing your story about how you started writing poetry from the 4th grade. And yeah, I hope you just keep doing what you do because I love the poems that you had at this reading. So thank you, Sarah. Our next poet of the evening is R. Cheran, an associate professor at the University of Windsor's Department of Sociology, Anthropology, and Criminology. Uh, Cheran writes poetry in Tamil, and he is one of the editors of papers presented at the 2nd and 3rd Tamil Studies conferences held at the University of Toronto in 2007 and 2008. In 1999, Cheran received a Creative Nonfiction Award from the Banff Centre of the Arts in Alberta, Canada. A few of his more than 15 volumes of Tamil poetry have been translated into English, some of which we're very excited to hear today. Thank you for joining us, Cheran.
Thank you for inviting me to read it. As you said, English is not my creative language. That's my academic language. But I write poetry in Tamil, and I write academic work and creative nonfiction in English. So I'm going to read a few poems from a series that I wrote during the lockdown in June and July here in a remote part of Toronto, Canada. And the series is titled On the Street, Anytime. So all the poems I'm going to read is titled On the Street, Anytime, poem number 1, 2, and 3, and 4. The first in the series. On the street, anytime. The dry jackfruit leaf falls down. It will not fly at night. In the dead of day, only the military tank rushes over it. Sunlight turns it into a trace on the street. On the street, anytime a boy, sometimes a girl, would be dragged out and shot. Their blood is not wasted. At first, quickly, and then leisurely, it seeps into the paddy field. Before being killed, many other witnesses who saw his and her eyes. It was the poet's task to gather them then. With great weariness, on the street, anytime, a murderer falls down in his fingers, a cigarette waiting to be lit. Without love or claim the one who tortures it, anytime is our national anthem. Second in the series, on the street anytime. On the street anytime you can get with the body. On the street anytime you can get with the body. The pleasure is but a part of it. Wetness, a mere wound. On the street anytime we may melt together as body and soul, as the indivisible full form like dogs, like swallows, like colorless butterflies, like snakes, we can come together. At the end of the fall, leftover leaves are the only witnesses. Enlightenment for the falling leaf, lust for the sprouting leaf. On the street anytime, we can fuck without love. It is unknown how much warmth remains in the sperm that fell on the snow. On the street, anytime, I throw out the unfinished poems. Written on beautiful colored papers. Whose feet steps on them on the street? My third poem in the series, on the street anytime awaits an unfilled pothole. An unfilled pothole. Rain during the winter season, leaves that fall in the cold. The wind that freezes in the chill, fill that hole. Near it, a white policeman shot 2 boys multiple times. The pothole twice filled up with blood. Both of them, the 2 boys, both of them looked exactly like my son. Height, beauty, black, brave. My last poem on the series. On the street, anytime, had never seen such emptiness. On the street, anytime, had never seen such emptiness. The poverty of love burns more than the open sun. The hours of midnight melted our bodies. In the morning sperm breast, the roof and the jasmine creeper on it, they shook. That's a long fantasy. Frozen eyes and fallen leaves fill the glasses of our empty souls. Endlessly fill the glasses of empty souls. A heart without affection. A vagina without wetness. Rejoicing that cheating in love is not only for the male, but for the female too. On the street and anytime, leaving me, she roams. A poem is refusing to come with her. And the poem refusing to come with her, and the first line of the poem is, on the street, anytime. Thank you.
Thank you, Cheran. You're done earlier than expected.
I have
Awesome.
one poem. Do you want me to read it?
Yes, go ahead. Yeah.
Okay. I was planning to read, but I was not sure about the time. So this is the last poem I'm going to read. It's a small poem. The title of this poem is Ayo. Ayo in Tamil is a kind of exclamation, right? When you are really upset or angry or scared, you say Ayo, right? The title of the poem is Ayo. Ayo. This word comes as the voice of the well. This word comes as the voice of the well. 1,000 children, 100 artists drunk, lost their way. Those who fell while crossing over the woven coconut fences, clandestinely, in the ecstasy of desire. I know the chapters of death. I know the chapters of the death of the rainy well. 27 years ago, exactly 27 years ago, I saw three soldiers of the Indian Army entering that house. Two held down the woman who tried to flee with a 5-year-old. Amid loud crying, the child slapped the face of a third soldier. Even now, I clearly remember his face. And the smudged vermilion mark on his forehead as a smile trickled from the corner of his mouth and fell on the dirty boot. In a single sweeping hands, he snatched the 3-year-old. He snatched the child, threw the child into the well. And now the well is without a voice. The well is without a voice. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Cheran. That was so beautiful. And I think Kanchan and I, when we were going through all the poetry, we got to read a few more of your poems, which was awesome. And one of the things that we kind of got fixated on was this crazy juxtaposition between violence and beauty. And we just wanted to ask you, like, how are you able to strike that balance of using violent imagery, but only to the extent where it drives your point home and it's not too much? Because that was the beauty of your poetry.
Well, so you just saw the tip of the iceberg. I have been a witness. I've been a witness to history and witness to all kinds of violence, including what I call genocide. I not only survived it, but I have been writing throughout my life by living it there, right? I wouldn't call it is there anything that we could say the aesthetics of violence or beauty of all this poetry. It is extremely difficult because some of the things that I have written and some of the things that I've been writing, it is you cannot write. We cannot write genocide, but we can try. And if you want to try, the usual ways of doing it won't work. Sometimes there are no ways, only the sound. Sometimes there is no meaning, only an image. Sometimes you cannot simply start writing about this particular kind of experiences. Then you start, then you crash. It is something like someone trying to write about a male trying to write about a rape of a woman and trying to be in her shoes or in her slippers or in her nothing, and imagine that I'm going to write about how I was raped, right? As a writer, as a poet, I will not rule out those possibilities, but it is extremely, extremely ungrabbable. So the challenge is how to write this ungrabbable. I know social science won't work. I know sociology will no help. I know anthropology will not help us, no political economy. I teach a course on genocide. This is what I tell. It's a sociology and anthropology course. I said, half the time you read poetry and fiction, not my social science. You grab it. So that's
yeah, definitely. I think like your words really breathe life into the poem, and the poem takes on its own course. And I think that was like definitely some imagery and themes that we found in all of your poetry. And I wish we had more time for it, but unfortunately we don't. So thank you so much, Cheran. Your poetry has really hit a lot of the uncertainty and trauma that people are facing in this year, and not just this year, have been facing, minorities have been facing.
Thank you very much for having me.
Yeah, thank you. All right, I would like to introduce our next poet, Kalpna Singh-Chitnis. She is a prolific poet and editor-in-chief of the publication Life and Legends. Her poems and essays and translations have appeared in notable journals like World Literature Today, California Quarterly, Indian Literature, and many others. Aside from the number of anthologies in which her poems and translations have been included, her full-length poetry collection, Bare Soul Partridge, was awarded the 2017 Naji Naman Literary Prize for Creativity. She is also the recipient of the Bihar Shri and the Rajiv Gandhi Global Excellence Award, among others. Aside from poetry, Kalpna is also an independent filmmaker in Hollywood. So let's welcome Kalpna, and I will unmute her.
Thank you so much. Hello, everyone. First of all, I want to thank India Current and Matwaala for organizing, hosting this event, and creating this opportunity for all of us to come together and share our poetry. Personally, I know Usha, Pramila, and of course, Srishti, very kind, very hardworking. I have only thanks to say to all of you. And I would begin without introducing my poems. I will just tell you about the topics, and then the rest of the things are in the poem. So my very first poem is about pandemic. After that, I would read about a ravished woman. And then after that, I will read poems on racism. So my very first poem is At the Sound of Suzumi. The title of the poem is At the Sound of Suzumi. Behind the masks are eyebrows, cheekbones, and jawlines. Behind the masks are eyebrows, cheekbones, and jawlines. The faces have disappeared. The one who has stolen all the faces has no face. The one who has stolen all the faces has no face, or maybe it does, 1.3 million and counting. Stretched beyond the horizon is a stage. Stretched beyond the horizon is a stage. It appears on it like a kabuki performer and disappears with a generation stuffed in its kimono. It appears on it like a kabuki performer and disappears with a generation stuffed in its kimono. It is the dance of the century. The sky is a drum beating all night. We put on the mask of the moon. We put on the mask of the moon and dance alone and together. We learn the steps unlearned at the curious sounds of Suzumi. We rise, breathing deeply, and breathless we fall. And the second poem the title of the poem is ER. My case wasn't serious. My case wasn't serious, so I waited in the lobby of the ER for my turn. The patients needed to have patience, except those who showed severe symptoms like fever, cough, nausea, and fits. But I didn't vomit. My temperatures remained stable. And I was able to hold the ground like a tree standing in a storm. But I didn't vomit. My temperature remained stable, and I was able to hold the ground like a tree standing in a storm. I didn't show any cuts and bruises. I didn't bleed or collapse like some other did and were rushed into rooms where the doctors were ready to diagnose and treat them immediately. I just had some internal injuries no one knew. I just had some internal injuries no one knew. I bled inside. I died in front of everyone without anyone noticing me. My third poem is the the third poem is about the ravished woman. The title of this poem is The Salt of a Woman. Here she goes down again, like a tree, bark naked. Here she goes down again, like a tree, bark naked, her flowers stolen, fruits eaten, tongue clipped, and vagina axed. Every stem of her body uses the salt of a woman, and her tears, like the ancient rivers of her land. Her story is much older than her civilization. Her story is much older than her civilization, invaded and plundered, conquered and gifted, questioned and blamed, dismissed and shamed over and over and over again. My other poem is about racism, which I want to read that last. Let me read that. Another poem which I have about the ravished woman. Its title is If. If I die after a rape, do not file an FIR. It isn't the first time. Don't go to the court seeking justice. There is none. Do not allow politicians to enter my village or town. No media, no clown, no debauchery of whataboutery. Do not bother hanging my perpetrators. They will be born again in a multitude in no time. Do not imprison them. They can't be restrained. I'll be violated again, just in another place and time. If you wish to do anything for me, if you wish to do anything for me, write an epic or a tale in my name. If you wish to do anything for me, write an epic or a tale in my name and teach them if you can in every school on earth. If you are a woman, tell my story to your sons. If you are a woman, tell my story to your sons. If you are a man, tell it to your daughters. If you are a preacher, preach me as a sermon to the believers. If you are a preacher, preach me as a sermon to the believers. And my last poem is The Pending Introduction of KSC. This is a very personal poem. It took me 25 years to write. And you we will wonder how come 25 years. Every time I started to struggle so much with it, whether I should even write it or not, whether people will like to read this or not, or should I even talk about this subject or not. This is a poem on racism, The Pending Introduction of KSC. It was 1994 when I came from India and enrolled myself in College of DuPage in Illinois. And this was my first interaction in my classroom. I was taking class of architectural drafting and design. Here, the poem begins now. I'm not sure whether it is pitiful or powerful. I'm not sure whether it is pitiful or powerful, but here I am, still trying to make sense of everything. I don't know why Timothy Jones, sitting next to me in the class, chose not to make my introduction when we all introduced a student sitting next to us. I do not know why Timothy Jones, sitting next to me in the class, chose not to make my introduction when we all introduced a student sitting next to us. Mr. Meisner went blank when he inquired if he can introduce someone else and chose to introduce Alan. Was it because I was colored? Was it because I was a woman? Or was it because I was different? I do not know why Mr. Meisner didn't ask any question to Timothy Jones. I do not know why I didn't ask any question to Mr. Meisner myself. I just sat there like a stump of a tree. I just sat there like a stump of a tree. I am still sitting there in my classroom. I'm still sitting there in my classroom for the past 25 years next to Timothy Jones, waiting for Mr. Meisner to come and ask him a question, but would he ever return? The lectures begin and end, but the questions remain. Everyone comes and goes, but I do not leave. I must keep waiting until someone introduces me. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Sarah. I was personally blown away by your poems. I absolutely loved your poem "Salt of a Woman." I think it's defiant, angry, sad. Like personally, it just hit all the right emotions for me. I actually wanted to thank you for using your platform as a poet to talk about sexual assault because I feel like it's become such a taboo where people don't know whether they want to speak about it or not. So I'm glad that you used poetry to give survivors a voice. So thank you for that. Um, One of the questions that I had while hearing both "Salt of a Woman" and your other poems, which focus on other topics of importance, was you kind of start with this frame of reference where it's kind of like an individual experience, but then you open it up to something broader. Like with "Salt of a Woman," you talked about how this is something that happens, unfortunately, over and over again. And I was wondering, like, is that something that you intentionally wanted to do to focus on something specific before moving beyond that?
Sure. First of all, let me correct my name. I'm Kalpna, not Sarah. Maybe it was just a slip of a tongue.
Oh,
So that's okay. That's all right. And secondly, fortunately, I have not been a victim of rape or assault, sexual assault. But as a woman, I can put myself in other women's shoes and can feel that the same pain and anguish. And recently, so many incidents back to back have happened in my country, in my native place in India. So that actually has really bothered me a lot. Not that this has not happened in other parts of the world, but it becomes something personal when it happens in your own place. And so I could relate to those women. And I felt that I should voice this because people don't want to talk about it. That's the only reason I wrote about it. And this poem was rejected. This poem was rejected from magazines because they said, oh, it just speaks so clearly, so loudly about this thing. They wanted to tell me more in a hidden way or, indirectly or something like that. But it is just, this attack is so, the way it comes to me, their pain, I just wanted to portray it the way I experienced it. Or maybe I use that as what you call in acting we use in Hollywood. We try to take the persona of the characters, their role. And this method I always use in my poetry.
Mm-hmm.
I just try to be the person. Like recently I'm writing environmental poem. I just think that I'm a tree. So then that's how, that poem was born.
That's amazing. Once again, thank you so much for using your voice to stand up for some people who can't. Our next poet of the evening is Indran, apologies if I mispronounce, Amirthanayagam, a poet of many languages. He has written poetry in English, Spanish, French, Portuguese, and Haitian Creole as well. Aside from publishing 19 poetry collections, Indran writes about the craft of poetry on his blog and is an editor for a publication called the Beltway Poetry Quarterly. He directs Poetry at the Port, which is a monthly spoken word series, and also co-directs DC Alt, an association of literary translators. He has received fellowships from a number of organizations, including the Foundation for Contemporary Arts and the U.S.-Mexico Fund for the Culture as well. On a side note, his book, The Migrant States, was published on June 15th, so make sure to go check that out on Amazon. Thank you for joining us, Indran.
Thank you very much. I just want to make one plug also. I do a channel called the Poetry Channel on YouTube, so I invite you to look for that and send poems, videos. Assault, rape, violence. There's been a theme this evening, and Cheran and I go way back, and I couldn't help thinking back to that uncivil war. So I'll just read a couple of poems from this book, Uncivil War, and then read the couple of newer poems. Fire Department. Where is your village? Burning. Where is your village? Mined fields. Where is your village? Blasted in crossfire, wounded under jungle trees. Where is your village? Running across marshes, shot in the back. Where is your village? Waving white flags, frisked, registered, supervised in a camp. Where is your village? Blowing up army friskers, other villages. Where is your village? Toronto, Berlin, Tamil Nadu. Where is your village? Madagascar as option has not been discussed. Where is your village? Hasta la vista, special envoy. Where is your village? Burning. Ready to move. We are Mayans, we are Tamils, we are Armenians, we are Germans who lived once in Poland. We are Burkinabes stuck in Abidjan, Somalians in Maine and Massachusetts. We are witnesses to the only truth worth repeating. Have a bag of essentials, holy book, toothbrush, a fresh set of clothes ready to put on your back when historical conditions change suddenly. Father, geese honked on their way to the other side of the sky. Rain and wind teamed up cold and befogged the neighborhood the day my father died. The day my father died, my brother sang a lullaby to accompany him on his journey up high to that territory where my son says he will teach poetry, where I say poems will fry like butter and geyser out of the hole in the center of space, as if from molten rock, my son, out of entrails of carcasses still fleshed, from trees ripe with vines, conceived in death, hammered from memory. Here are belts and hides, impressed, distilled, etched on buckles and holsters, Ola-leafed images, parchments, poems to survive the fires. He has left us his name. We wear it today, and metaphors that curdle and whirl through our consciousness, each one at its own pace, in nature's slow dying, in its corybantic profusion. My Father, you have given us the saving cup and voices from the wilderness, and caught the undertow of sadness, which rocks what fleeting gladness there is today or may once have been. Now that you have seen the vision that enlightened your face and suffused it smiling in the moment of death by the altar of the Blessed Sacrament in this St. Jude Church, now you can tell us quietly in dreams as we stumble into morning and break our bread, that awesome secret which led us out of the island and into a history where a turn of the head does not make salt, and you do not expire in gunfire or necklaced with a tire, where you can make peace with God and guide your children, adore your grandchildren, love your countries, all the countries woken up by your voracious reading as boy and man, the countries from which all travelers return, the day their fathers die, laden with gifts, the day our fathers die, awesome secrets, the day our fathers die, ambrosia bliss, the day rasa, the day Guy, the day our father died. And now I will finish with these two poems that look ahead, that look to this new dawn in America. And I hope elsewhere in the world, I hope there is some inspiration from what has gone on in this country, the vote that has just taken place, and what it portends. In love and politics, I miss you now more than I did yesterday, and a whole lot more than a month ago. This accumulating, sometimes leaping, desiring desire is splendid, grand, and gives me almost infinite energy. But to where is our train hurtling? Are we riding in Lawrence's Coney Island of the mind, the America he observed then, a year before I was born? And this America today, when will it fulfill the dream? Every Sunday when I go to see my brother, I pass a line of cars a few miles long outside a church on Randolph Road. The drivers wish to satisfy hunger, waiting for them at their houses in this time of virus, lost jobs, not enough money to pay mortgage or rent. I have read about soup kitchens, the Great Depression, dust, Scrabble, have seen Henry Fonda play Joad in The Grapes of Wrath, but to see ordinary people hungry now in automobiles, to see shooting in the back of black men on grainy police cams, to see George Floyd, his life pressed out. There is something rotten in America. Shakespeare wrote once about Denmark. There's something awry in the pigsty, a ferret in the coop, a bandicoot, a rat, a snake. There is something not right on one side of the debate stage. Yet there is enormous hope, belief in the good and in loving kindness. The man, senator, widower, his wife killed in a car crash, who rode Amtrak every morning to Washington, every evening back to Delaware to join his children for dinner and to put them to bed. This ordinary, decent Joe has my vote and will soon have a new name and title, Extraordinary Joe, Extraordinary President. Shall we take the metro to the mall get off at the Smithsonian, walk together to find a patch of grass, lay down a blanket in our mind, a carousel, a pretzel stand, then raise our hands in glee on the Ferris wheel, reciting poetry on Inauguration Day. Can you tell me if I have time for one more or not?
You are exactly on time.
All right.
So
Well,
no, if that's
then I'll
okay
stop
with
right
you.
there. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Indran. I'm sorry to have to cut off such a beautiful reading.
No, it's fine.
My question for you is that you read from your book Uncivil War, right?
That's right. Yeah.
So what are the connections, which I can see in your poetry where you talk about George Floyd, what are the connections you're seeing between the Civil War that you were part of and then the political divide that you're seeing in America today?
Yeah, I mean, America is going or has been threatening to have a second civil war in the American context, right? The first one took place back in 1861 to 1865, and then here we are in a kind of a second, potentially second civil war, this great divide between color schemes, red and blue, and rural and city, and so on. But you know, the threat of the war was perhaps exaggerated. The danger of the man currently at 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue, perhaps overblown. We'll see, but let's hope.
Yeah.
But the election went off very smoothly.
Yeah. Do you
There
feel
was
like poetry can bridge this partition divide that you're seeing?
Yes, I do believe very passionately that poetry can make something happen. It does not exist only in the value of its saying. I'm quoting from, misquoting W.H. Auden, who said the opposite. You know, he said that poetry does not make anything happen, that it exists in the valley of its saying. A great poet, a great nihilist, I suppose, but not an optimist. And I happen to be, I suppose, now an American optimist. I certainly am not a Tamilian optimist. I'm certainly not an optimist for what's been going on in the country that used to be known as Ceylon. The country I was born into was known as Ceylon then, which just no longer exists, now called Sri Lanka. Anyway, Cheran and I share many years of friendship and living this this uncivil war that. But you know, there are so many uncivil wars around the globe, and now I think we have a chance to bring all of our peoples together, not only in this country but throughout the world, to fight the real war of our time, which is the battle for the survival of the planet. You know, the battle against the destruction of the climate and so on. Yeah. But
thank you so much. Yeah, Indran, your thoughts have been enlightening. I mean, you're totally right. Your book being named Uncivil War. What war is civil? You know, it's an interesting linguistic choice to call something a civil war. So I'm very happy that you illuminated that. And again, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
On this note, we will introduce our next poet, Varsha Saraiya-Shah. She is the author of Voices, a chapter book published by Finishing Line Press. Her poems have appeared or are upcoming in various journals and books, including Borderlands, Convergence, Penguin House, India, and the Texas Observer, among many others. Her work has also been featured on a local public radio station and been staged in multi-language century dance program called Poetry in Motion by a dance company called Silambam Houston. I would love to watch that. Before I unmute Varsha, I just want to remind everyone that there is a public forum at the end, a public discussion. So please put your questions in the chat box if you want. Okay, with that, welcome Varsha.
Thank you, Srishti, and thank you, Kanchan, Usha, Pramila, for this beautiful forum, poetry community. I'm going to read 4 poems. The first one is titled, I Speak from Towers of Silence. This poem was really inspired by looking at those temporary morgues in vans in New York in March, April. And it made me think of the Parsi tradition of putting their dead on the open terraces for the vultures. And it's titled, I Speak from Towers of Silence. It is spring. People are afraid to sit on empty benches in parks, self-distancing, coffins length apart. No matter where on the street or at work, dreading a footloose and lethal microbe. Hugs are hats hung at the back door. Babies like flowers can't stop being born. Mamas in hazmat suits, swollen with milk, weep for their misfortune. Imagine a massing of crows on terrace, gathered for feast to appease the dead. Vultures plucking at corpses. I wish not to pollute air or water, earth or fire. Let birds of prey feed on us. Fire, good fire, that burns to cleanse us all of hunger and passion, anger and emptiness. Assure the earth, it makes us part of our dirt. Tell the skies, merge in your stardust. Oh, invisible, can you hear our dirge? Italians belting out operas alone. Tarantellas on balconies, hear the Spaniards banging pots, strumming guitars in night skies. Indians trumpeting conch shells, chanting Om, Om, Om. My next poem is, it's really a reflection on the year of pandemic and political crisis, the climate disaster. I think science is our best friend, and ultimately only we can save ourselves. With that, this poem is titled Neither Hope Nor Miracle. The wise have their eyes on a vaccine, the one with feathers. Only a fool asserts this pandemic will disappear like a miracle. Truth be told, where fools rule, debacles run the show. Treat the feathery thing like science, unfenced, with countless windows. A ticking clock, flight, a trail untrodden, make its chronicle bring flood to dialogue with drought. Sun to salute sickened souls. You've got to do something. Yes, Pablo says, cut all the flowers, but no one will keep your spring from coming. Listen to John the Dreamer. Listen to Lennon's refrain. He's not the only one. Someday you'll join me and the world will live as one. Yet, hear the science, forewarned, will be torn and viruses too will return. Climate too will throw in towels of tsunamis and earthly tantrums. Rains may remain at bay. Winds will weep with forests spewing fires, sweeping humans in numbers never imagined before, only to guide the buoyant conducting concerts on curbs and lawns, to live as one, dishing out a prasadam with lamps and hymnals that too will run their course. Even obstacles, cycles of all that begins will end with something to mourn. Okay, I'm going to go easy, lighter now, the next 2 poems, and end with that. And I always have thought that in all my troubles this whole year, I go back to either music or humor. And with that, I thought I will read a poem that's inspired by a quote by Miles Davis, my favorite. And he said, if you understand everything I said, you would be me. The title of the poem is When the Wind Blows. Listen to what you can leave out near the lamppost. Between a window's slats, blue light that wraps a solo. Pillow talk on a half-empty bed, alter music like phases of the moon. Phase by phrase, make it your refrain. Add purple or coral, turning a tune green in color no one's played before. Let blue insinuate blues to take you somewhere you would rather not. To harvest a syllable raw and rare from the womb of thesaurus. Leave Lisbon or Paris, leave flamenco sketches the gypsy makes with her train to Tunisia for a night of Saharan jazz. Curving and certain, listening to the moony wind. The caravan ablaze with desert stars, one step forward is enough to come out of the micro fragments of your broken world. And I'll finish with this last poem. It's really a poem with a lot of levity of our daily lives. And I would say, yeah, it came from like most of you know, this year we've been putting things off. I didn't go to get a haircut for 8 months. And then I got a few reminders that just come on over. And so this poem is again inspired by a beautiful quote, an article rather, by Jasmine Hughes in New York Times Magazine. She said, when the world unravels, braid your own hair. The title of the poem is Headlines. Ponytails and barrettes trip into 30s. Mirror takes me further back to pre-motherhood of 20s. Images of thick braids undone to unruly curls, a velvet of waterfalls. Coiffed in a pinned up bun at work to minimize brownness. Such effort to fit in mainstream professionals. Such headache at day's end. I picture ladies at the salon with my hairstylist, a visual artist with patient ear for every wisp of hair. He wipes down his queenly chair for each. I wonder, does he share his silver mirror with everyone? An heirloom from a great aunt, he had said once, placing the mirror in my hand. Gentle and handling like art of his own before the finale of teasing a curl, one that dangled like an earring, whispering to a lock on the neck. I told him how change speaks to me, the arrival, for instance, of first child. I learned to yield in ways unlike any other. Let my braids open up. Shoulder length, free-flowing, American, fancy, modern, perhaps ethnic, exotic. None a path to freedom, though. He reassures me today, just come in. We'll reshape the wildness. Safe with a mask on. It is fall. This length frames your chiseled face. You can change your style each day. On the way out, I asked, do you know Broadway theaters will remain closed till June 2021. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Varsha. First of all, congratulations, because you've managed to turn this pandemic into some good poetry, which I'm currently trying and somewhat failing to do. Quite a few of your poems discuss the coronavirus and both, its extended, but also its very personal impacts. And I was just sort of curious to know what your pandemic writing experience has been like and how it feels to write about something that's kind of still going on rather than in retrospect.
Actually, I have not been as focused ever before as this year I've been. And I think part of it is because of being homebound. And I have become a student all over again. This is my third workshop going, and I've done a lot of readings and revising and new poems. And I think, as I had talked to Sara Garg once, that how when you read a lot, then you are going to be converse with what's around you. And I find that reading even nonfiction, that helps me a lot. And I think the connection with nature has become even deeper this year for me than ever before. And that has inspired a lot of poetry, which is, I today read more pandemic, but I have a lot of non-pandemic work going on, and ekphrastic work actually. And all my walks, even on a bicycle, I stop sometimes to write. And I mean, I think this aloneness, I have really worked on it to turn into a truly good solitude, if I may, if that answers your question.
Thank you. It definitely did. And who knows? Currently, personally, I've been trying to draft out some of my own poems, so maybe I'll take some more walks, see where that takes me. But thank you so much. I absolutely loved all of your poetry. Last but not least is Saleem Peeradina, an award-winning poet who is the author of First Offense, Group Portrait, Meditations on Desire, and many other works. He edited contemporary Indian poetry in English, which is one of the earliest and most widely used texts in courses on South Asian literature. His next book, An Arc in Time, Cultural Chronicles from the Last Half Century, is a book on essays, reviews, and conversations to be published in 2020, so stay tuned for that. Aside from his publications, Saleem has given readings all over the world and was a writer in residence in Michigan's Chelsea Public Library. His work will be read by the wonderful Pramila Venkateshwaran, someone who needs no introduction. Welcome, Pramila.
Thank you, Kanchan. It is my great honor and privilege to read Saleem's poems. Saleem was awarded the Poet of Honor by Matwaala in 2017. This first poem is called The Body in Question. Glorified at the hands of artists, feasted upon by poets, its praises sung by music makers, dissected by physicians, its machinery exposed in anatomy textbooks. In repose, its beauty drunk in stillness, desire awakened in languor, the flesh animated, transported in slow motion to bliss, from the bud of infancy to maternal bloom, pushing its limits, to perform daring feats, body painted, perfumed, jeweled and tattooed, wet skin in wet clothes, the veiled body kept in the dark, body married to Christ, paraded on stage, dressed up or stripped down, sold and humbled into submission, bodies in whose soil is grown cotton, cane, corn, and tobacco to make nations rich, those bodies still slogging on, impoverished, bodies from which coal is mined and gold is extracted, body rewarded, eroding with disease, migrating bodies washed ashore, the body detached, its primal urges mastered by yogis, its potential sunk in self-indulgence, body behind bars in solitary, body effaced in suicide, body stopping bullets, blown to cinders by bombs, in genocide, counted in numbers, body in pain, suffering blows, coming to understand its frailty, eventually betrayed by its own failure, losing muscle, bone, attaining stasis, shutting down the body home at last, laid to rest. This next poem is called Song of the Makeover, and the epigraph is from a Hindi song. Hey ye duniya kaun si hai, ए दिल तुझे क्या हो गया, जैसे मंजिल पर कोई आके मुसाफिर खो गया. What good is this place, this other world, where the heart is ill at ease, where travelers reach their destination, discover they are lost. An error of navigation, a trick of perception, crunches two realities into a single space. When one is acted out, the other is on the blink. When the price of staying equals the blow of leaving, I turn full circle, renewing the past, making another start. All stories heavy with promise. Use two tongues or more. At home nowhere, I hop on and off, most at ease in a state of passage. Many times I have made the journey back, then crossed over again to the shore. I arrive, but my gaze lags behind, slow to make the shift. When I'm under close scrutiny, my attention is sure to be focused elsewhere. Here I am leading someone else's life, while over there, another face goes by my name. I take steady steps, but my heart keeps missing a beat. When I listen to the voice within, someone else interrupts me. I peer sideways to see whose shadow doubles behind me. The road long abandoned cannot account for my absence. The years ahead will not guarantee if another will seek refuge in my guise. In the interim, I cannot tell which half of my face I am wearing. As bold as my spirit is, I cannot quell a queasy feeling in the gut. The truth is, I am neither fully here nor there, never will be, so be it. I am not on the slippery edge of some breathtaking rescue, but in the middle of my stride, measuring out the extent of this made-over life. And this final poem is called The View from 70. Dear early settlers entering the bloodstream, bearing gifts from their twin lineages, they lie dormant, waiting to be guided by instinct to release their malignant power. We are a stage, a squat. This is what we provide from within. Fertile soil for them to practice their hit and run arts with the ease of those born to be warriors. They come with clear intent to occupy what they claim as their ancestral stake, and they're here to stay. Outside, all around, as indispensable as air and water, are others slipping through the cracks. Our bodies are host to their breeding, but we are given the means to keep them in line. We can go underground to join the resistance. The enemy to watch out for is the one who enters stealthily with unmarked baggage, like the seducer who played for years on the swings, slides, and seesaw of my heart and eventually left me breathless. The interloper has since relaxed his grip to become permanent member of the house. A seventh sense sending occasional signals of pain, even with the no vacancy sign, there will be intruders lurking around who will try to force their way in. Some lodgers match camouflage with decorum so well we forget they are here. We could fear these hangers-on, but they make better companions once we befriend them. They belong to us as much as our other faculties of smell, taste, or touch. We can uncover their secrets, test their limits, learn to use their guerrilla tactics against them. We know they are armed and dangerous, and against their weaponry, we have no defense. Whether their siege is short-lived or long, in the end, there is only one certainty. True to their calling, they are obliged to take us down. Thank you.
Wow, thank you so much, Pramila, for reading Saleem's poems for us. That was amazing. And I know we can't ask you linguistic or structural questions.
No, you could ask. Yeah, you can ask questions.
Well, we didn't prepare for it, but I just wanted to know really just what you thought about the poetry and how you felt it tied back to the theme of uncertainty and change, the poems that you read.
Yeah, the thing is, many of the poems have the themes of aging. They also have the themes of basically the body changing. The themes of are also philosophical in the sense, and with Saleem's poems, I mean, if you read much of his poetry, it has that philosophical basis, but then he has very concrete details through which he's able to talk about, abstract ideas. So here it is, the first poem was about the changing of the body and what happens to the body in so many different circumstances. And as you heard, of course, in today in many of the poets. And also, looking back, what do you see in hindsight? So that was another thing about change. And also, in the last one that I read, The View from 70, you see his very beautiful use of metaphor all the way through the poem, where, in the state of aging and disease, you also have the interlopers, so you have no idea what things lurk and come into it. And then you have to figure out how to deal with these interlopers. So he has, metaphors of the day that he uses throughout the poem, of these things that enter the body and, rain havoc, it creates a civil war in the body. So
yeah, it could not be more relevant right now with a pandemic on the loose.
Exactly. So, so he's talking about all of these changes outside and inside of us and what happens to us mentally. And as a poet, of course, he's able to deftly use language to, show us these transformations.
Wow. Thank you so much, Pramila, for reading Saleem's poems for us. I wish he could be here with us today so we could hear his voice, actually speaking this poetry, but it was so wonderful to hear it from you. That said, we are nearing the end of our poetry reading session. We have a few questions. A lot of them seem to be from Sarah. So I want to actually read out Sarah's question of what real life experiences influenced your poems, and why did you choose the voice, whether it was first person, second person, or third person? What was your choice in making that decision? And because we're nearing the end of the time, I'm going to allow each poet to answer the question and then just give their closing thoughts on the theme of uncertainty and change and a year of constant trauma and inconsistency. So Pramila, you can start if you want to speak on behalf of yourself or even Saleem, whatever you've been thinking. Oh, I have to unmute you. 1 second.
Sorry, what was the question again?
The question was, what real life experiences influenced your poems, and why did you choose the voice, whether it was first person, second person, or third person, that you did for your poetry? And yeah, go ahead.
So in Saleem's poems, he's speaking in the third person, and he specifically does that mainly to move from the even though there might be personal references, when you read the poem and you don't know the poet, you know that all of this is universal. So he tries to have that kind of universal message in the poems, and that's why he uses the third person. Plus, it gives him the opportunity to delve more into irony, because that's one of the hallmarks of his poetry, is his use of irony.
Thank you, Pramila. If you have anything to add as a closing statement, maybe just how your poetry was affected by this year of being inside, you're welcome to comment on it.
Oh, for me personally, yeah, I mean, for me, I've just been writing and reading a lot. And for us, because we are, trying to, we were supposed to run a Matwaala festival this year, and it became an online event. So much of the work, was basically stretched over the entire year. It has been a year of a lot of collaborations. lot of connections. It was something even more than normal. In fact, there are several people in this audience who are also part of my poetry world here on Long Island. So it has been great in terms of poetry reading, writing, etc. But on the other hand, I've also been dealing with a lot of anxieties. But of course, do all that come into the, the writing of the poetry?
Definitely. I know as a writer myself, it's been hard to stay creative throughout this time because sometimes you just get a writer's block because you're not doing anything. So all this amazing poetry that's coming out is just mind-blowing to me. Thank you, Pramila. And I'm going to unmute you, Indran, if you would like to comment.
Sure. First of all, thank you very much for this wonderful opportunity to share poems. And about the question regarding experiences, well, my experiences essentially have been the experiences of a migrant, of a person, of a displaced from the original home, and the original home changing its nature, being renamed and refashioned. And so at the same time, there are people there who are flesh and blood and friends, and so it feels very much there, part of you, but you have moved on or you have gone elsewhere. Life is elsewhere, the Rambo said, or somebody said. I don't know about that, but being elsewhere has been an inspiration, has been a motivation in the writing. I think also in terms of choices, I tend to write in the first person, sometimes in the third person, and sometimes in the second person. So I guess I don't have any, I probably have a preference for the first person. And my choices as a writer have been to write across borders between languages and to write in other languages. I certainly was afraid at first, insecure because I forgot my native Tamil. But then I thought once I started learning other languages, I worked very hard to learn them as well as I could, and I keep working on them. So, I mean, my daily routine is to listen to news in French and news in Portuguese and watch television news in Spanish and so on, as all part of a routine where these languages stay with me, if not, and then talking with people in these languages. About this pandemic year, I mean, yes, it's been a terrible year of loss, but I mean, as a writer, as a poet, I've written a lot. I've had a very unusual year where 3 books have come out in 3 different languages, in French, Spanish, and English. So it's a sort of an odd thing, I like the number 3. 3 is a positive, and I've been able to, but then, and many things have been born in the pandemic, such as virtual readings, and this YouTube channel that I've been doing is a child of the pandemic, and so there are some things I think are positive that are coming out of the pandemic in the way we communicate with each other and share with each other. The world is a much closer place through the way we've been using Zoom and the internet and so on. So all of that is good.
Sometimes you feel more connected and sometimes you feel very disconnected. It's both.
That's right. That's right.
Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you, Indran. Kanchan has a question for Varsha. So, Kanchan, would you like to ask your question?
For sure. Varsha, this actually just struck me while we were earlier having our conversation about pandemic poetry and what it means to feel inspired while at the same time we're so caged in just because of the nature of social distancing. And while we were talking about that, I kind of realized how on so many levels, I feel like all of us are on, like the crossroads of change. Like politically, we're one election down and we have no idea nationally where our country is about to go. We're also at the crossroads of course, the pandemic and not really understanding if there is going to be a vaccine, and if so, when will that be coming out? What our future is going to look like? And also personally, like for me, I'm a senior right now, about to go into college, and so I just feel like I'm at the crossroads of so much personal change. And so I was thinking about how I feel like my poetry might enter sort of like a new era or a new kind of style just because of how much change there is around us. And I was wondering if you felt the same way, like just in terms of, do you feel like your own poetry goes through eras depending on what's around you?
I feel like I'm on a very interesting wire, traveling from one end to the other. And I've been exploring new things like reading, for example, I've started reading Lucretius, and he has a book called On the Nature of Things. And that has become, I mean, I saw that on my bookshelf and I said, this is what I've been exploring for almost 6 months now. What does this mean? And that means starting from your own experience to what is the fine line between, say, loneliness to aloneness, to togetherness, to solitude. And I find that through addressing a creativity from me to you and everything that's in between, I find that I have something to say. And I feel like again, the line between memory and history, it's so small sometimes, it's so short that I'm trying to make sense out of, say, even 6 months ago. I mean, how many people have died and how many may die, or what happened in the elections and what may happen next year. We don't know how to predict or extrapolate things, but in poetry, when you apply that, I think your work grows and you explore more ideas. And I have personally found that I'm writing things that I didn't used to write before. And that some of it comes from just reading things that I would not have imagined reading. You know, I go online sometimes and books that I would not have read before. And I think this is sometimes—
Or even just headlines. Even just the headlines, yeah.
You know what, like I've never read newspapers so much before. and because that's where, that's a good point, Srishti, because that brings you into that, you were talking about the first person to third person experience. And we begin to relate to each other and connect as human beings. So that connectivity has grown so much in a very, very fundamental way. Like you were wearing a mask and I'm wearing a mask at the store. And I wonder why so-and-so is afraid to even look at you in the eye. And that's our only connection, to look. And if you smile with your eye, the other person is going to smile with the eyes too. And
very true. I realize, like, if I'm taking a picture and this is on, I'll be smiling, but you're only seeing this much.
I'm working on a poem on that. That's, I mean, that kind of minuteness of observations. And I think that the experiences also come from, I live right across the park. So whenever I feel like what Pramila was talking about, the anxiety, I just open my door and go straight to the park, and the anxiety goes away like the cloud in the sky. It's gone.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Varsha. That's very, very helpful to reframe how we're viewing this pandemic and being stuck, On that note, I will ask a question to Kalpna. Do you want to, I don't know if she's still here. Okay, I guess I'll ask Cheran a question. Cheran, if you'd like to share you did actually already share some of your real life experiences that framed your poetry, but maybe something from the recent year that's maybe poetry like you've been working on more recently. What kind of experiences potentially played a part?
You mean the poetry that I am currently working on?
Yes.
Well, I would like to start by giving you one one example. Uh, it's a personal thing, first of all, because uh, you all have just listened to me reading my poetry on the street at any time, right? It's about streets, different kinds of streets, not just in Canada, not just in Sri Lanka, not just in India. It's a different kind of streets, right? So those poems were inspired, or I started writing the series when I was under lockdown, and the lockdown had a very specific meaning for me from from two viewpoints. First, I am a completely, totally immune compromised person, so I can go out. So I can, if you do not, if you do not have legs, you only think about walking and dancing, right? They say the fish do not talk about water. It's in the water, right? That
Right.
that is from one particular perspective, right? It's without the chance of going out and mingling with the other people, taking a walk with my dog and all this kind of thing. Actually, those poems resulted when I took my doggy out for a walk in that area. So this is a kind of thing how this particular kind of a very unique kind of confinement inspired to write certain kind of poetry. On the second level, as Indran would know and some others would know, are back in Sri Lanka, in Jaffna, in the north of Sri Lanka, we have experienced enormous amount of lockdowns and curfews, economic blockades, and all these kind of things, unending, right? Nothing, no food left. The government would not send anything, no electricity, nothing could move. If anything moved, that would be shot. That was a different kind of a lockdown, and I didn't have a chance to read some more on those kind of confinement, the notion of confinement and notion of the mobility, right? As the two things that define human beings is one is freedom, complete freedom. The other one is the freedom to move.
Right.
So
That's a really good, and two separate scenarios where you're confined. I'm sure you'll write something very beautiful based off of that. I'm excited to read it. I really would love to know more about your history. And I'm very excited that you and Indran are friends, because it just feels like there's like this large, community of people that we can learn so much from as people from a younger generation. And we're seeing the trauma and the colonization and all the issues that are now pervading our society here. But we come from a rich backstory and history. So, I was actually going to tell Kalpna, I'm also Bihari, so my roots are Bihari. It's very interesting to hear what she has to say and all the things that she's thinking about, because they're similar, even though I grew up here. So I really thank you all for sharing your voice. And I want to leave it off with our youth poet, Sara. She's been prolific in the chat, and I'm sure she's learned a lot from all of you. So Sara, do you have any last words?
Yeah, no, as I'm 15 years old, right? So I have a long way to go in my voice and writing. And it was fascinating to hear all these people. I'm sorry for all the questions. As my English teacher's here, he can attest. I ask a lot of random questions. My teachers are sometimes like, Sara, you ask too many questions. So I'm sorry if I spammed the chat a little bit, but it was a really amazing experience for me. And I'm really glad that you guys invited me to do this.
Thank you so much for coming, Sara. And of course, we're so happy to have you and have budding talent like you and Kanchan in our lives. It gives me so much hope. There's always so much to learn from people older and younger than me. And so I'm constantly learning from everybody. And the pandemic has been the best time to do all of that learning, So never stop spamming the chat, Sara. It was great to hear from you. Thank you everybody else for coming. On behalf of Kanchan and I, since we're basically at our time limit, I'm going to thank all of our incredible poets who open themselves up to us and provide vulnerability in this space and give us a voice, give our thoughts a voice. And that's super important in such a time. Thank you to Matwaala's Pramila and Usha for their help, their insight, and for curating these wonderful artists. Thank you to Kanchan, who is an amazing co-moderator. Can you believe she's a senior in high school? That's it. I can't believe it myself sometimes. And thank you to the publisher of India Currents, Vandana Kumar, who actually allows us to have this space and to create a forum where we can all openly talk and create art and be here, you know, and that's awesome. And last but not least, thank you to everybody that's watching. I know I kind of spammed the chat with the donation and subscribe link, so please go to indiacurrents.com and subscribe. There's donation matching right now, and without your help, community journalism cannot be effective. So please, 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 please subscribe and donate. And if you subscribe to our newsletter, you will get all the information about the future poetry readings that we hope to continue doing. So thank you so much and have a wonderful day, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, everyone.